service, though you can experience joy to worship service, a joy that does not happen in prayer meeting, though joy can be happening at prayer meeting, and joy that cannot get from a great Sabbath school class, though joy can be experienced there. But there's a unique harvest joy that comes from being engaged in the mission of the church and to introduce Jesus to people who do not know him and to give a greater insight and glimpse into God's character to those who do know Jesus already. It's a harvest joy that comes from sacrificing your resources to pour into the lives of a child that's playing VBS with their stuffed animals at night, saying, "Awesome God," the next morning, singing songs and praising Jesus that you helped him learn as a kid or her as a kid, and the harvest joy that comes from sacrificing your agenda, your time, so Ed here can get a glimpse of a God that Ed didn't even know existed. I met Ed when I lived in the town of New Bern, North Carolina, which they say is where Pepsi-Cola was invented. I was given the opportunity to serve the New Bern church, where I preached my first evangelistic series on the book of Daniel. How many of you have ever attended before an evangelistic series based upon Bible prophecy? Raise your hands. Let me see who you are. Oh, quick, quite a number, so you know what I'm talking about here. It's like Vacation Bible School. Instead of it being 1 week, it can be several weeks. And there's no crafts and there are no games. Like VBS, an evangelical series needs a lot of people serving in various roles in order to be successful. And if the volunteers don't show up, or if the volunteers show up but don't do their job, the effort, the campaign suffers. You know, too much emphasis gets put on the speaker. There's more soul-winning power in the pews during an evangelistic meeting than there's soul-winning power in the speaker behind the pulpit. And I tried to hammer that into the psyche of that local church to believe that that was the case. And I had row hosts. I had people spread throughout the sanctuary, row hosts. And their job would be to greet those guests who would sit near them and to give them the Bible study, the literature for the night, and then to try to talk and engage the guests after the meeting, try to see if there were any questions that they could answer and so forth. And at those meetings, I had row hosts who didn't even show. Or I had row hosts who did, but they just gave the literature and they were afraid of the guests for the rest of the night, just wouldn't interact with them at all. And then I had a few row hosts who believed that there was more soul-winning power in what they did in the pew than power in the message I was preaching at the pulpit. One of the few row hosts who believed that, his name was Dale. Dale would drive from where he lived and worked. He was a handyman, so he'd drive from where he would work and live. He would drive an hour to the meetings, be at his position, engaging the guests, and then after the meeting was over, he'd drive an hour back home, and he did it night after night after night. And it just so happens that of all the guests that attended, he had Ed and Pat sitting in the pews where he was responsible for, and I'm so glad God put them there with him. On the very first night of the meetings, Ed told Pat that he would drive her to the church for opening night, but after opening night, she was on her own. She had to get her own ride, drive herself. He was not coming back for a second meeting. He made it perfectly clear before they walked in the door together. That's what Ed said on opening night. And then he came to night 2. He came to night 3, 4, 5, 6. They came the entire